Hello everyone and welcome to this interview with Gamemaster. I'm not going to introduce Gamemaster, he's going to do that himself, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, I'm Gamemaster1379. I've just been an engineer player for TF2 for several years now. More recently, past few years, I've been getting into competitive, so currently I'm a gold engineer. And I'm here today because I'm actually a discoverer of one of the schematic exploits, the Manconomy exploit, for TF2.
And I think it's super great to have you here. It's super nice of you to be in this interview. And I discovered your post on Reddit because I like to browse there for news and stuff. It's pretty rapid site if you want your daily TF2 news and stuff and silly images. So I found your post there and I actually made a video yesterday, like going briefly over them with some graphic stuff, and now you're here to talk with me about, like, explain a little bit more in depth, like your reasoning behind it, how you went about it, and maybe a little more in detail. And you've given me a lot of resources that we're going to be taking a look at. So can you, like, briefly maybe explain to the people who are new to this what exactly is the Manconomy exploit, just briefly?
Yeah, sure. Hold on a second, my mumble's kind of acting up. Okay. So the Manconomy exploit, more or less, before Manconomy came out, there was no such thing as crates or tool-based items. So, you know, everything was just an item with an attribute. There weren't really any special qualities. Everything was pretty safe and sound. So, you know, people could technically manipulate the item schematics then, but there was no real risk involved to Valve. It was pretty well a riskless endeavor. But when Manconomy came about, it actually became a little more dangerous because we then had, you know, item server interactions. We had keys that unboxed crates that gave you items. We had strange variants. We had name tags that allowed you to make copies of stock items by naming them. So the Manconomy exploit was the initial discovery of the item schematic manipulation in order to cause these things to happen from the client.
Alright, and I think there's like one big question that you won't want to answer. How the hell did you find out of this?
Well, actually, that kind of dates back to before the actual Manconomy update. I had been playing TF2 then, and I had discovered the item schematics and the attributes and everything, and I used to just tinker with it, you know, just try this and that, make some silly things happen. My friend owned a server, and sometimes he'd let me upload modified item schematics. And I would do, you know, silly things like turn a scout class token into a golden wrench to go around the server meleeing people, or make the backburner air blast, which, you know, was unheard of in that time when the backburner still couldn't air blast. So I was already familiar with the item schematics. So when Manconomy came out, I just started looking around at some of the files, and I noticed that, you know, there's a couple consumables in here. Like, I saw a key as an index entry, and I'm thinking, you know, if that's there, and I wonder if Valve would put any checksums in. So I decided, you know, just for the hell of it, see what would happen. You know, I didn't think it'd work. I override the Islander with like a Manco supply crate key. Next thing you know, I'm looking at the countdown screen, and then I have, you know, I've unboxed a Vitasol, and I have no idea how to, you know, really handle that.
Oh, I mean, that's pretty game-breaking and amazing that you found that. So when you've did that, like, did you unbox a couple of things? Because personally, really honestly, I would have unboxed a ton of things before I told Valve. Did you unbox anything, like, except the Vitasol?
No, the Vitasol was the only thing I unboxed, and honestly, if I were doing today, maybe I would have slipped a few more unboxes in. But you know, this was like, I found this sometime in I'd say the first week of October, and I reported it by October 10th or so, and you can see that in the email between Robin Walker and myself. And Manconomy came out September 30th of that year, so, you know, this is like the first 5 days of crates. Nobody even had any idea what the idea of crates were, like, why unbox them? Do you get unusuals? What's an unusual? I mean, I saw somebody that traded earbuds for a crate at one point, so that goes to show you how early on this was.
And there was no real, like, trading, not even an economy or anything, so nobody knew what any unusuals were worth and stuff. So, and they didn't know how much potential value they can have.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knew what anything was worth at that point. People were trading vintage weapons for, unusual hats because they had no idea what an unusual hat was. How rare was it? One person unboxed it. Well, maybe didn't mean anything to them because there was no, awe factor from the community behind the value of, a burning modest pile.
I can see that. I actually have a pretty interesting question here. Do you think that anyone else discovered this exploit and just never told anyone about it and just like made it for profit for himself?
That's a good question. If somebody did, I'd imagine they really would have come forward by now with it. If they did, I think it's really unlikely because I discovered this within the first week of Manconomy coming up, and there have been no potential for this exploit to even exist before Manconomy. So my guess is that probably not, because people had no value or incentive behind getting keys at that point in time. So my guess is probably nobody really thought about it, or even if somebody did find it, which I still think would be improbable at this point, that they just didn't abuse it because there was no economics behind the abuse.
I have a question myself. Do you think
Sure.
that, like every update, do you think it's possible that Valve's gonna let something like that happen again? Are they gonna be so thorough that there's not gonna be a case with that again?
Honestly, Valve is not always the most secure with a lot of their stuff. I often see a lot of inadvertent happenings that are, accidental things that they do. I think Valve sometimes plays a little more patchwork than they should. So, honestly, I mean, right now, I'm pretty sure everything's pretty secure, but it wouldn't surprise me that with the new update, they add some sort of new mechanic, like more than recently, they did kill streakifiers, and someone found an exploit with that recently. So I think with more content that there will be more potential holes.
Yeah, and they've publicly said that TF2 is pretty much a playground for them, where they add some new crazy feature and then they test it out. If it works, cool, then we'll apply to other games. Doesn't work, who cares? It's just TF2. Like, now there's a community, or not a community, market and stuff in CSGO, for example. I don't think that would have been there if it didn't work out in TF.
Oh, absolutely. I'd agree with that. TF2 has been Valve's stomping ground for years. They try anything with TF2. If it flies, it transfers. If it doesn't, it just gets buried.
Alright, so you sent me some pretty rich resources here. We have the first one here called Attach Particle Effect Static. Now, would you mind telling me about what that is exactly and what we can find in there?
Yeah, sure thing. Alright, so in the Attach Particle Effect Static folder, we actually have, looks like a text document and a couple of images where I was corresponding with Valve employees about the incident. So, are you familiar with the Pyro's bubble pipe hat, the space helmet with the pipe with it?
Yeah, that already has an effect, right? Like the bubbling effect of the pipe.
Yeah, the actual effect that is with the bubbling pipe is technically under the same indexing that you find the item schematics. You can actually find it under attribute _controlled _attached _particles. The actual pipe smoke is listed under there with all the unusual effects. They're handled by that same system. So what you'll find out here is that all pipe smoke items actually have in their schematics, all of them have attached particle effect 28, which is the schematic entry for the pipe smoke. And this is the same exact thing that up until this time, how unusuals were also attached to unusual variants of items.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Exactly. So the thing is that, up before the bubble pipe, there were several unusual variants, but none of them ever used pipe smoke. So none of them were ever using the attached particle effect. It was always exclusive to just unusual effects. Well, the thing is, Valve made an oversight on their set attached particle attribute class. And what happened there is they didn't realize that when they were attaching that to the item schematics and they gave every single bubble pipe a 28 for its pipe smoke, that whenever they were unboxing other hats and they were attaching that other effect, that they weren't actually going to be two separate effects. Since they were both the same system, they were actually adding together. They were becoming additive. So let's say, for example, that the creator of the bubble pipe, which I think would be like a Grodbort employee or something, I'm not really sure, would get a self-made bubble pipe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, self-made items always have community sparkle on them.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then pipe smoke is always 28. So what would actually happen is those two would add together. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm sorry, community sparkle is index 4, it's not index 2. That's wrong in the document.
Oh, I'll just change that.
Yeah, sure. So let's say we have community sparkle, and which is index 4, and the pipe smoke, which is index 28. If you add those together, you get index 32, which actually gives you orbiting planets. And I know the owner of the Outback Intellectual, the creator of that, for quite some time, until I actually had reported this, his Outback Intellectual was actually giving him orbiting planets.
That must be some sight.
Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting. They had little planets orbiting around the Outback Intellectual, and it was crazy. But
that's just a silly one. I mean, it's not game breaking at all.
Oh, no, it's not. This is completely cosmetic. There was not a lot of behind this. But here's where it got a little bit concerning. This is an economic thing. People that unbox unusuals, they unbox an unusual. They have something of value that they want to show to the market. Well, when the bubble pipe was able to be unboxed, there was a significant issue there. Anybody who made it unbox, they would either have the wrong effect, or they would have no effect at all, because at the time, unusuals could go up to I think 28 to 30 in index numbers, and bubble pipe was already 28, so
yeah, it's going to overflow.
It's going to overflow, and you're not going to have any effect at all. So you could unbox an unusual bubble pipe and have no effect on it.
Wow. But you could also be very lucky. Oh wait, I don't know where the burning. What ID is that? 13?
Yeah, I believe burning could be 13.
Darn, you couldn't get a burning then. It would have been awesome to unbox it in nuts and bolts, and then apparently it was burning.
Now, nuts and bolts is a lot higher. I think that would result in something that just didn't exist. I believe that around the time the highest one, I think, was dark orbiting fire, and you would have to unbox whatever was item index 12. So that would have been, hold on, I can actually look it up real quick. I have the schematics open in my other monitor.
Nice.
Yeah, that would have been, if you unbox a fly's unusual, it would have ended up being a dark orbiting fire. So those kind of people lucked out.
Oh, yeah.
Until they fixed it, but otherwise, a lot of people, if you had burning, that gave you index 41, and you had no particles at all. You had no unusual.
Ouch.
Yeah, so that was really, it was more of a cosmetic thing than anything, but that was still something that was going to hurt the economy. People were not happy getting these bubble pipes. They were unboxing them, and they had weird effects, or they just didn't have anything. And if you look in that folder there that I sent you, there should be a couple of emails where I was speaking with Rob. I actually had emailed Robin at the time, but they ended up being forwarded to Eric Smith, who just started taking over Team Fortress Affairs.
Yeah.
And I just have a quick little explanation of what happened. And I also had been corresponding to him about some no-build map exploits with Engineer.
Mm-hmm.
You can see bits and pieces of that there.
Yeah, there's a
sure.
no-build here.
So no-build, which I also have another directory for, if you want to go ahead and pop in there. Yep, is, okay, so this one is actually a major gameplay issue that I had been, doing extensive testing with, and it was just baffling me what was going on here. And do you remember when Gorge first came out, or is that before you started playing?
That's way before me, but I might have heard of something about it.
Do you remember when they added the forward spawn I'm sorry, not you wouldn't have remembered, but when they added the forward spawn that didn't used to be there, right? Or no?
Yeah, I don't think that didn't used to be there.
Yeah, so originally it wasn't there, but that platform was still there, and engineers on Red Team would love to build there.
Oh, you could still build there?
You could actually,
boy,
they had no means of not building there, so you used to be able to build there all the time, and it was ridiculous. Because, it completely shut down the game.
Yeah.
So, Valve actually added a no build there, even before I think it became a new spawn. So, with no build there, that obviously solved the problem, you would think, right?
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, but as it turned out, people were still building up there, and nobody understood why.
And that's when you discovered why.
I finally figured it out why. It took me a very long time to figure it out, but it's actually a lot simpler than you think. So if you look at the first image here, where it talks about function no build on the no build brush highlighted, this is actually a view of the map CTF well in the rafters, where the rafters have been no build. There is this highlighted function here, which is a no build trigger function, which if you look at the next image, you can see that brought up. And what this does, it's supposed to prevent engineers from building buildings within this no build brush. So, you know, we don't want engineers dropping buildings up in the rafters, because obviously that's, you know, pretty obnoxious.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, if you look in the next image, the fourth image here, where it has the red circle and the blue circle, an engineer standing in the red circle, you know, he can't build up there. But if there's an engineer within this blue circle range, you know, he could be falling, but if he's within that range, he was still able to build up there.
Oh, really? So the no build zone doesn't actually track the like the place you're building. It actually tracks the engineer.
Correct. It actually is tracking the player, not the entity. So by this manipulation, there were actually several places in which you could manipulate this, like the gorge rooftop. If you stood on the awnings on either side, you weren't in the no build function, so even after Valve had patched it twice over, you could still build up there.
Wow. And it seems stupid when you look at it now, but if you think in reality, when Valve sat down and make it seems logical to like track the player, but it's obviously people are gonna find some way to like exploit it.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, finally I had brought this up to their attention, and you know, they finally patched it, but I actually figured out how they patched it because they accidentally introduced a bug when they did this. This is Valve's patchworking at work.
Boy.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but for about a week in mid-April of 2012, there was this patch about engineer buildings no longer working. I actually have it in the the text document here, the April 17, 2012 patch, where they fixed being able to build buildings in no build zones. I had actually reported this in the email that you can see there. And they had finally patched it. And they actually accidentally introduced a bug where if you were, let's say you're a black box soldier or an Ubersol medic and you hit a building, you were getting the on-hit effects from the building as if they were a player.
Wow.
So that means a medic could run at a teleporter that's, you know, left over from an NG's nest and get, you know, 2-3 swipes off it, and you have 50 to 75% charge of Ubersaling a teleporter.
Wow. Yep.
So you can only imagine the kind of game-breaking thing that had.
Yes.
So basically what they had done is they actually started tracking the building's entities as if they were actual players. And it took them like 10 days until April 27th to actually patch this bug. So
yeah, that would have been a hell of a week when people knew.
It was a fun week. So yeah, that was actually really interesting. And I was kind of surprised that's how they went about it, because I figured Valve would have just, you know, modified something else other than making them into player-based entities, but that's apparently how they went about it.
It doesn't seem that logical. But I guess if they had,
sure.
they
had the
could
reasons.
I guess they could only track could they only track player entities with no build zones? Then that would be really easy for them.
I suppose. I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind it originally, but it's hard for me to say because I can only speculate what Valve does.
Yeah. Wow, you've done a ton of work for them, and yet you haven't received the hat yet.
No, the Valve's never really given me anything. I've kept a lot of this stuff, you know, on the lowdown because, you know, when I first report this stuff, it was so really early in the development stages of the economy economics.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of this stuff could be detrimental to the economy at this point, and, you know, just even these gameplay bugs could be a major setback for people. To, you know, if they found other ones and they started mass manipulating them, I didn't want that to happen. So I honestly just kept quiet about a lot of this, and I guess Valve's not one to reward people that don't go public with their efforts, so I didn't really get anything. And, you know, seeing the deflector bug exploit, that man getting his halo, and the more recent schematics exploit where the gift to pulse became keys, you know, that was also extremely similar to my exploitation, but in a more limited form. You know, I decided I should email Valve, see if they'd be willing to retroactively reward me for having done the exploitation, but Valve really hasn't given me any responses.
I really hope that you get one, because this is a huge piece of work for the community, and you probably saved a lot of people's asses.
Yeah, I probably
Especially
did,
people
but
with bubbling pipes.
oh, the people with the bubbling pipes, they're got to be praising me. But in all seriousness, it's been a lot of fun, you know, tinkering with the files, seeing what goes on, just figuring out what's going on. But I've probably saved quite a few people with a lot of these early discoveries.
It was really, really nice of you to come here and talk with me. It was super interesting. I'll probably be. Can I put a link so you can download your resources if you want to check them out yourself?
Yeah, sure. If you want to throw a download link up, that'd be fine by me.
All right, I'll throw a download link, and you're probably seeing most of all the resources on the screen. By the way, the gameplay you've been watching all along, I forgot to say, is actually some of Gamemaster's gameplay from where again?
This is gameplay on Pro Viaduct RC4. I was subbing for a former gold teammate as a ringer.
All right. Well, that's going to be some quality there. I hope you enjoyed this interview. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I'll hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.